Greetings, fellow seekers of the unexplained, and welcome to the UFO Case Studies channel, your portal to the world of UFO encounters and enigmas. The fact that you've chosen this video certainly indicates that the subject of ufology interests you greatly. Surely you've often asked yourself the famous questions: what are we, after all? Where do we come from? Where are we going? Are we alone in the universe? Is reality only what we can see with our eyes, or are there other layers and dimensions in nature's totality that we have yet to discover? Why, for thousands of years, has humanity turned its eyes to space in search of something it can't even define? Why do we persistently launch spacecrafts and space missions toward the stars? Why does our species, whether openly or not, live in constant search of other thinking species through outer space? Could it be that, deep down, we intuitively know something that, for some reason, we have forgotten? It is for this reason that we bring you this video, which humbly aims to provide answers to these questions in the form of hypotheses organized not by ourselves but compiled from ancient sources attempting to answer the existential questions that drive us, and especially how the issue of life on other planets fits into all of this. Therefore, we ask you to disconnect from your preconceptions, prejudices, and simply let yourself be guided by your intuition and imagination. If, by the end of the video, at least one person is touched or awakened to this presumed reality, this channel will have fulfilled its purpose. Let's start then from the beginning. Things need to have a beginning. Regarding the long-standing human question about the existence of a creator, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle wrote to us that Napoleon Bonaparte, when leading his troops to Egypt while contemplating the starry mantle in the sky, addressed some scientific professors in his caravan and provocatively asked them, "Who, gentlemen, made these stars?" For Conan Doyle, to say that the universe resulted from the action of immutable laws is merely to push the question further back, giving rise to a new question: who is the author of these laws? If we position ourselves before the universe to deny it some creative principle, we would be falling, above all, into a logical fallacy, since the norm of cause and effect is one of the basic postulates governing the universe. This principle is unavoidable. If there is an effect, there was a cause. Necessarily. Everything that exists is an effect, and every effect has a cause. The world exists, therefore it is an effect, therefore it has a cause. If this cause exists, it is an effect, and therefore has a cause, and so on. We can go back to infinity. In other words, there can be no effect without a cause. This is an irrevocable, insurmountable physical law. We can call the primordial cause of all effects by different names, God, or whatever name each one prefers, but to deny it would be a contradiction and incongruity. Telling that all existing things arose by chance would be a euphemism we use to disguise the discomfort caused by the fact that we are ignorant of how events relate and arise. Aristotle theorized that all effects can be linked to a more immediate cause. Thus, when we apply this logic in reverse, that something older preceded and gave rise to something more recent, we are forced to retreat indefinitely until we reach a final or teleological cause, as Aristotle called it, located at the origins of the universe from which we can no longer go back. Regarding the search for this enigmatic and great principle, William Blake wrote in 1907 that the universe has always appeared to the natural mind as a kind of enigma whose key must be sought in the form of some illuminating word or name or lever of power. Such a word names the principle of the universe, and to possess it means, in its own way, to possess the universe itself. God, reason, the absolute energy are all solution names. The manifested universe, therefore, has its roots in this eternal, unlimited, immutable, ever unmanifested principle. This principle transcends the scope of human understanding. But the fact is that the innumerable solar systems that constitute the manifested universe are expressions of this ultimate reality and manifestations of this transcendent intelligence. It is the primordial substance beneath the infinitely varied manifestations. Let's move on to the second step. What are we within the universe's scheme? In a very summarized way, we would be a part of the expression of this primordial reality, God, if the viewer wishes to call it that way. The human species would be formed by rational thinking beings who, within this grand scheme of creation, would be the only one totally and consciously capable of making moral decisions on their own, whether they be good or bad, and deciding their own destiny as individuals and as a species. Therefore, the ultimate reason for our existence would be the need to evolve, just like any creation of nature, for this is the intention planned for us by the creative principle of all things, which is itself constant order, virtue, and progress. In other words, we need to continually improve as human beings. Change and constant evolution await all creatures in the paths of the universe, so that renewal continuously improves us all. In humans, there is something more than physical needs, the need to progress. The state of humanity's backwardness and the stagnation of its intellectual and moral development would be errors incompatible with its nature. Each human being carries within themselves the germ of their improvement, so that humans were not destined to perpetually live in a state of backwardness and moral primitivism as if in eternal childhood. Such a state is transient for man, who needs to free himself from it through the virtue of progress and civilization. There is nothing truly metaphysical, supernatural, or strange about it. If the viewer reflects on the matter, they will see that they are actually facing a great obviousness. Having understood this, let's move on to a principle that I am sure is the most delicate and controversial in our explanation, the fact that our evolution would not occur only during a single corporeal existence. For this, the viewer should consider the hypothesis that we are all naturally composed of a physical, tangible portion and another more subtle, spiritual portion, if you wish to call it that. The subtle, spiritual portion would be the seat of our consciousness, while the physical, disposable portion would be our human body left behind through numerous corporeal existences that we experience throughout our existence. In the broadest sense of the term, this reincarnation conjecture cannot be proven by contemporary science, but it is widely accepted and propagated by numerous religious traditions such as Hinduism, certain branches of Christianity, and Buddhism, for example. Other so-called secular philosophical traditions such as the Platonic and Socratic schools also accept it. Many human groups and civilizations of the past, such as the Egyptians, Indians, Greeks, Tibetans, and Celts, for example, also embraced this conjecture as a natural reality of existence. Thus, the life of each human consciousness or spirit would be composed of a series of corporeal existences, each of which represents an opportunity for it to progress ethically and morally. Just as each corporeal existence consists of a series of days, in each of which man gains an increase in experience and instruction. This is because the human cannot remain indefinitely in ignorance, as he needs, within his role in nature, to achieve the purpose that creation has assigned to him. Each individual would be educated through the force of successive physical existences, and moral and intellectual changes would gradually establish themselves in the innermost part of each consciousness. Under these conditions, man, using the freedom of choice, processes his evolution over time. The spirit, in the incessant work of its multiple existences, accumulates moral conquests, character improvements, and refinement, increasingly and better organizing its deep consciousness, in whose mysterious domains memories are stored, so that the soul, at each stage of its immortal life, is reborn for a new conquest, always aiming at supreme perfection so as to harmonize with the great creative principle of all things. However, according to this hypothesis, each of these corporeal lives experienced by the soul is not necessarily lived on the same planet in the universe. We must consider that humanity, in its broadest sense, is not all on Earth, but only a small fraction of humanity. Indeed, in its broadest sense, humanity would encompass not only Earthlings, but all beings endowed with reason, inhabiting the countless planets of the universe, so that we are simply a type of humanoid among different types of humanoids scattered across numerous inhabited planets in various galaxies. In the grand scheme of nature and the universe, the word human would define a unit of conscious and rational life capable of making decisions on its own and choosing, through its moral and ethical acts, the rhythm and direction of its own evolution. The different humanities scattered throughout the universe would indeed have different physical forms, different cosmic attire, suitable for the ecosystem of the planets on which they live. However, deep down, each of them is a part of this great humanity, that is, they are expressions of the primary and original reality of the universe, God, if the viewer wishes to call it that. In this way, the conception that Earth is the center of the universe would be petty and unworthy of the power of the great creative principle of the universe, which, according to this logic, would have concentrated all its care and providence on this imperceptible grain of sand we call planet Earth, and would restrict the concept of humanity to the few human beings who inhabit it. The Creator's house is the universe, says the Christian and Hindu tradition. The plans of evolution are characterized by their multiplicity within the infinite. The different planets scattered throughout the cosmos would offer beings that incarnate there, each with the physical attire adapted to the reality of the planet in question, abodes corresponding to their level of ethical and moral advancement. Therefore, by accepting this hypothesis, humans should put themselves in perspective and accept that we are not alone in the universe. On the contrary, possessing a spectacular, diverse, and varied number of other humanoid species. Continuing our reasoning, let's remember that the function of each human consciousness in the universe is to evolve ethically and morally so that we can improve our character towards the level of moral greatness of the very creative principle of all things. However, such evolution is complex and laborious and could not occur in just one physical existence, whose ephemeral nature is often brief and limited. For this reason, each consciousness would gradually evolve through various existences, lived on different planets adapted to the state of consciousness and the need for experiences that each being requires for its own personal evolution and for the evolution of those around them. It is important to note that, according to this theory, the souls that incarnate on a particular world are not bound to it indefinitely, nor do they go through all the stages of progress they must achieve to reach perfection. When in a world they reach the degree of advancement that this world supports, they move on to a more advanced one, and so on until they reach the state of full evolution. Each planet would correspond to various stations, in each of which they encounter elements of progress appropriate to the advancement they have already achieved. It is a reward for them to ascend to a world of higher order, just as it is a punishment for them to prolong their stay in an unhappy world or be banished to another even more unfortunate than the one they are prevented from returning to when they persist in bad behavior and acts of moral decline, such as injustice, selfishness, envy, intolerance, and violence. These ancient traditions say that planet Earth is not the starting point for the first human incarnation. The period of humanization generally begins in worlds even lower than Earth. In these more primitive worlds, the beings that inhabit them are somewhat rougher. They take on a humanoid form, but without much beauty. Their instincts are not tempered by any feelings of delicacy or benevolence, nor notions of right and wrong. Among them, brute force is the only law. Lacking industries and inventions, they spend their lives in the pursuit of food. However, the great provider of the universe does not abandon any of its creatures in the depths of darkness. A vague intuition, more or less developed, of a supreme being remains latent in their intelligence. This instinct is sufficient to make them superior to each other and to prepare them for promotion to a more complete life, for they are not degraded beings but children who are growing. Between the lower and higher steps, there are numerous other worlds. According to this hypothesis, although we cannot make an absolute classification of the various worlds, we can divide them based on their state and purpose, considering the most evident characteristics of each generally as follows. There are primitive worlds, intended for the first incarnations of the human soul, worlds where the newly born soul is in control of itself, in possession of free will while still ignorant of good and evil, but with the possibility of moral evolution. There are also worlds of atonement and trials where evil dominates over good. There are also regenerating worlds, also called transitional worlds, where souls that still have atonement to do extract new strengths, resting from the fatigue of the struggle. Following these are blissful, blessed, happy worlds where good outweighs evil. Finally, there would be celestial or divine worlds, abodes of purified consciences where only good reigns. It must be taken into account that the qualification of lower and higher worlds is not absolute, rather it is highly relative. Such a world is lower or higher in relation to those above or below it in the progressive scale. It is important to keep in mind that the criterion for the evolution of each planet is how its inhabitants act ethically and morally even before their intellectual and technological evolution. Here on Earth, for example, we have various examples of how technological advancement contributes nothing to our moral growth, quite the opposite. Our well-known planet Earth belongs to the category of worlds of atonement and trials, which is why human beings on it live embraced by so much misery, both physical and moral. On Earth, afflictions outweigh joys. The material and moral situation of terrestrial humanity is not surprising, considering the destination of Earth and the nature of its inhabitants. We're here to learn and evolve, among sometimes hard proofs and lessons. We are fulfilling a stage as human beings on this planet with the purpose of benefiting from its limitations and hardships, evolving as consciousness through actions full of virtues, wisdom, justice, fraternity, detachment, tolerance, and love. Only in this way would we be able to ascend to new material existences to come in more regenerated worlds. Let us also remember that the planet Earth itself, regarding its geological structure, ecosystems, fauna, and flora, is not inherently evil, but only its inhabitants are mostly at a backward level of moral vibrations. The Earth, on the contrary, is an invaluable source of resources and natural beauties that, when used rationally and orderly, provide us with the material means to achieve our moral objectives. In conclusion, could these ships we increasingly see in the sky be attempts by other, more evolved humanities to make contact with us? Perhaps with the intention of alerting us to the need to be more ethical, just, and fraternal with our fellow beings, thus better adapting to the great creative principle of the universe in order to continue on our evolutionary path? Could our galactic brothers be secretly helping in our technological evolution, teaching us secrets behind the scenes of existence? Could we, in the future, be these same extraterrestrials living a new physical experience on more distant planets? One fact that the viewer must keep in mind is that this theorization is very old and comes from sources that existed long before ufology became the popular culture phenomenon it is today. In fact, such information dates back to a time long before mass communication vehicles, cinema, movies, televisions, airplanes, powerful telescopes, and when human imagination was able to process the idea of flying ships from space. So, let us search within ourselves for the answers, ponder on the information propagated here, and we will see very clearly that the universe is an immense organism animated by eternal life. Just as our body is directed by a central will that governs its actions and regulates its movements, the universe, under its varied forms from the starry sky to the infinite subatomic, is also so. Everything knows, reflects, and honors a living unity, a conscious reason that is the absolute and perfect principle of all effects. All forms of life are linked according to the grand law of evolution. Nowhere in the universe does life cease to exist, requiring continuous renewal and incessant transformations towards improvement on any planet it may be. Regardless of whether the viewer believes in these hypotheses or not, let us hope that each of us can live day by day our own effort of personal improvement.